Alright, if you're tuning into model number 3, we're first going to start with our value. Our value for model 3 is 1 and 2 hundredths. 1 and 2 hundredths. So the very next thing that we want to do before we get started with making our equivalent fraction and our equivalent model, we're going to go ahead and label those places. So take your pen or pencil and underline the place values. And let's record those values. So the number 1 is in the ones place. The 0 is in the tenths place. And the 2 is in the hundredths place. Now that we've recorded the values of each number, we can easily turn our decimal quantity into our fraction quantity. So we have the whole number 1. We have 100 equal pieces here, and the number 2 is in the hundredths place. So our denominator is going to be 100. And then I simply need to think about how many hundredths we have. We have the number 2. So now we have our decimal amount and our fraction amount. The next thing we need to do is shade our picture to reflect these amounts. So the first thing I'm going to do is take care of this whole number 1. That means the whole model is going to be shaded in. So I'm going to outline, and again, I'm going to quickly shade to reflect that the whole model is shaded. So there's my whole number 1. And then I'm going to go over and look at the tenths place. I don't have any tenths, so I do not need to worry about shading in any columns, but I do have 2 hundredths. So I'm going to go over to my model and shade in the 2 hundredths. So this is 1 and 2 hundredths, and that matches my fraction and my decimal amount. The next thing I want to do is circle the place that we're rounding to. For model 3, we're rounding to the nearest tenth. Circle nearest tenth. And that means that in our decimal value, we're going to circle the number that's in the tenths place. That would be the 0. This will help me when making my endpoints on my number line. When making my endpoints on my number line, I need to start with anything that is in front of that circle. So we're going to start with the number 1. We have our decimal, and the next number that's in the circle is 0. Now I need to think about the very next tenth. What would come after 1.0? The very next number after 0 would be the number 1. So 1.1 is going to be my endpoint for my number line. To help me with my midpoint, I'm going to add a 0 to the front of my number line, and I'm going to add a 0 to the end of my number line. Now I simply need to think about $1, perhaps dollar, and $1.10. What could be between $1 and $1.10? That's right. Our midpoint is going to be 1 and 5 cents. Record that down. Now we need to simply just think about where would 1 and 2 hundredths or 1 and 2 pennies fall on this number line. So 2 is going to fall right here where 1 is. It's going to fall, we have 1, and it's going to fall before the $1.05. 1 and 2 cents. And so since we're closer to the number 1, we're going to circle 1, and that means that this number will round to 1.0 when rounding to the nearest tenth. Okay, I'll see you back for problem number 4.